Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. We have webinars every second and fourth Thursday of the month, and I'm so happy for those of you who are joining us live and anyone listening to the recording. So today we are very excited to have Dr. Aaron Turner with us. With a first-class degree in anthropology, Aaron pursued an academic career, getting his master's and PhD from Brunel, did I pronounce that? Brunel, where he also worked as a researcher and junior faculty member. He was interested in how a deeper understanding of humanity would enable positive change, or at least increased mental freedom from cultural limits. Obsessed with how humans and societies actually worked, he became fascinated in his uncle and aunt's work. Their work seemed to be based on a truly transformative insight into human functioning. The prospect of a new platform for change and understanding drew Aaron to study with George and Linda Pramsky and their colleagues, and then work with them for 10 years. As well as running their practice for a number of years, Aaron was keen to apply their discoveries to organizational and business issues as challenges. At that time, they were one of the first practices to apply their approach to organizational and leadership issues. In every area it was applied, the understanding brought significant improvement. Based on this experience, Aaron has dedicated his professional life to highlighting and applying the transformative potential of a principle-based understanding of the mind to our current challenges and limitations. During his career, he has done this within individual and couples counseling, business and organization development, leadership development, including corporate and military, sales training, education, and mediation. Aaron founded One Thought to bring an appreciation of this understanding to the mainstream. Aaron is a published author, international speaker, and lives with his family in London, and is currently speaking to us from South Africa. So, yeah. Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie. I realized listening to that bio, I should have written a shorter one. Sorry. Well, it's a real thrill to be talking to you all. I would put your faces up, but I'm a little bit concerned about my internet, so I'm going to keep it simple so it keeps the quality as good as possible. So I was thinking about this webinar and kind of what it would be good to talk about. And as Bonnie said in the introduction, from my perspective, an understanding of the principles is kind of what people are missing, and it's all you need. And I've been fascinated to see how it applies in all sorts of contexts. And I've been recently really interested. I've been finding myself having a much easier time generally, and also finding my work much simpler and more effective. And in preparation for this webinar, I was kind of reflecting on, well, what's that about? What's that? Why is that? And what made it more difficult and complicated before? And what's making it simpler and easier now? And I wanted to kind of share my reflections on that and what they and what they boil down to is a difference between looking at what the principles are and why that's relevant for any of us and everything else. There's kind of a line. There's kind of a line there. And when you move into everything else, things get more complicated. There's more to think about. There's more to work on. There's more things to have on your mind or in your awareness. And as you come back to what the principles are, there's just, well, what are the facts of the things that we're dealing with? And that's incredibly simple. And there's not so much you need to know about that, even though you can get an endlessly deeper appreciation of it. And it's been really interesting to me from that perspective to see how easy it is to get distracted or kind of go outside of what's actually relevant or useful and kind of think about more stuff than you need to, or focus on more stuff than you need to, or do more stuff than you need to. But in order to discuss that a little bit more, I thought it would be useful for me to kind of give you a little bit of background and then kind of hone in on my understanding of what the principles are, and then my appreciation of kind of how I've managed to make it more complicated. Not that I'm boasting or anything. So I was actually listening to Bonnie's introduction about my, my past. I was an academic, and I was reflecting on that for the One Solution conference. And I realized that, in my academic career, I was really interested in helping with the world, helping people, making the world a better place. I'm going to have to move into another room here. So I was interested in understanding people, and so I got involved in research. And what was really interesting about my research career is we tried to understand what was driving people to do what they were doing, what accounted for conflicts, what accounted for relationships, what accounted for identities, what accounted for culture. And we'd look into it as deeply as we could. And it was incredibly fascinating. But at the end of every research project, we came to the conclusion that more research was needed. So everything we'd look into, we'd get more detail. We were incredibly fascinated, but it would never simplify. It would always complicate. And then we'd look into the next thing, if we could get funding, and it would complicate. And it wasn't until I listened to George and Linda and started to get an understanding, and Dickon too, and all of the people at Pransky and Associates, I started to get a feeling that there was a simpler driving force behind it, a simpler set of principles behind it that explained everything. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is, because it does seem a little bit uncommon that that would be the case, or unlikely that if that was the case, we would have discovered that. And, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So, isn't this magical? So, so we'd always get more detail, and we thought more detail was more understanding, but it wasn't until I came across the principles that I started to see there's a difference between having more detail or more technical understanding and getting closer to the heart of something, closer to what explains it, and really closer to the facts behind it, not the symptoms, not the information, not even the patterns. Because in my research career, we were really interested in patterns. But there was a fundamental difference between getting a more detailed understanding and getting a more fundamental grip. And to me, in stumbling across the principles, I stumbled across something that gave me a more fundamental grip of what was going on for human beings. And the more I've looked into it, and the more I've worked with people from that perspective in all different fields, it seems really to be the fundamental facts you need to know, and a full set of the fundamental facts you need to know. So I'm going to tell you my current grip of what those basic facts are, and then show you how that's, to the best of my ability, all you need, and how I found that to be the case. And then I'm going to let you ask me whatever questions you want, just so you can kick the tires a little and make sure I'm not talking complete rubbish. And as probably all of you know, we mention the principles as mind, consciousness, and thought, but those are just words that, I don't want to explain what I think those words mean. I really want to talk as best I can about what facts those words point to, because that's the important part. As concepts or ideas or definitions, they really don't mean anything. It's like our name. Like my name doesn't really mean anything. And once you get to know me, that name will mean something relative to me, because it refers to what you know about me. And the principles are the same way. It's pointing to some of the less visible but more fundamental facts about what we're dealing with, what we are, what we're up against, what we're in, what's going on, what the fundamental facts about life as we have it are. So I want you to listen to what I'm saying with the knowledge that I'm suggesting that, you know, this is a full set of information. there's no missing piece, because it's when I've considered it a full piece of information, that's when it's taken me beyond my existing understanding and allowed me to discover, wow, this really is pointing towards the fundamental facts that you wouldn't guess, but that really will expand your understanding if you're willing to consider it that way. So the fundamental fact, oh, that's brilliant, they're closing the door. Sorry, I should have thought of that. The fundamental fact is really that there is one true fact in terms of life, and that's that life is the manifestation of an energy, that everything that you see, everything that you experience, everything that you are has energy behind it, you know, kind of like Einstein's thing, E equals mc squared, that everything's energy, but not energy the way that we think of it in terms of electricity and kilowatts and power, but an energy before it becomes any kind of tangible physical thing. So maybe the best way to imagine this is whatever was there before the Big Bang, that out of nothing. I was also many months ago watching a program about, you know, basic physics, and it was talking about when physics got interested in, well, what is nothing? Is nothing a vacuum? Is nothing just emptiness? And actually what they realized is nothing is a very fertile field from which everything comes. And actually it's in Stephen Hawking's book as well. It's like everything comes from nothing. And what the principles point to is that nothing is the something behind everything. So that's the one unifying fact. The difficult part of that is I don't think we'll ever really understand the full richness and depth of what that is. But because it is everything and we are it, we kind of feeling it. And I'll talk a bit about that through thought, through our minds, we're feeling it, experiencing it. But it's something that you can explore if you know it's you and it's coming from you, and if it's all the same thing behind it. And that's sometimes a very difficult thing to consider, that everything is the same energy, that everything comes from the same, it is at space, the same energy. But the principles suggest that that's quite an important one. It's like, if you say, well, I like thought, I understand thought, I know everybody thinks, and I can understand consciousness because we all have feelings and we're all aware. But that mind thing I'm not so sure about. Well then you're going to have trouble really looking in the direction of the principles, because the fundamental fact is everything is energy. And if you want to understand your potential and your experience and your connection with others and your connection with life and your ability to have a richer life, and your ability to help others, you got to consider that. Now, because that's the direction you're looking in, is what's the nature of the fundamental essence of what the mind is, of what we are, of what life is. And what the principle of mind points towards is that is pre-worldly. One way of saying that is it's spiritual. One way of saying that is it's energetic. It's bigger than, you know, life itself as we know it in the physical dimension. So it's formless. These are all just different ways of pointing us beyond what we would know from the world that we live in towards something deeper that you can't really think about, but you can feel. So if you look at your quieter, deeper moments of experience, you kind of getting, in my understanding, you're getting a less restricted feeling for mind. You're getting that profound emotional richness. You're getting a less filtered recognition of your connection to everything. You're getting more of that power of knowing and intelligence. Do you ever notice when you have less on your mind, things are more obvious? Great ideas come to you. And the idea that that's what everything is means that that's what we are, means that you have the wind at your back, you have everything you need. Now, before I contemplated that that was true, I looked other places for well-being. I thought if I solved my problems, I'd feel better. If I got the right relationship, I'd feel better. If I got the right job, I'd feel better. I remember after I learned the principles, I really, really wanted to go to Lacona and intern with Dickon and George and Linda and Sandy and Keith and Cara and Erica. And at the same time, a PhD proposal for funding was accepted. And I was like, God, I don't know which one I'm going to do. Shall I go to Lacona and do an internship to share these principles? Or shall I do this PhD? And the first thought that popped in my head is, what's going to make me happier? And that was my old way of thinking. And then I realized, well, neither of them. Happiness comes from experience and my own essence. I mean, how could either of them have anything to do with my happiness? And that shift in orientation is an example of when you really see there are depths of experience available because you are experiencing what we're calling the mind, or what we're calling the energy behind life, or what we're calling your essence, or the life force, or whatever you want to call it. That's what you're experiencing, which means every potential for experience is within you. And the deeper the experience, the more powerful the mind, the less restricted, the more unleashed, in a way, the more innate, or no, I'll run out of words here. And that is a really important fact to consider, because it flies in the face of the way things look and feel. It looks and feels like we're all different, and we all have different personalities, and we all have different capabilities, and we all have different intelligences, and we all have different abilities to be happy and connected. And these principles suggest, no, that's all made up. That's all. You're going to want to call red herring on that. And what's interesting is I haven't had to understand mind, and I still don't understand it. I've just had to know that that's the direction of something internal and deeper and rich, and that's where all the potential comes from. And that's been enough to look to see that looking outside, or looking into my thinking, or looking anywhere else is kind of the wrong direction. And in helping people too, as soon as I start to think their problems are bigger than their resources, I have to question it, because it flies in the face of that principle. So it's really, really important. The other thing that is vital, I think, to the fact of mind is, if it's a universal intelligence, the very intelligence or energy behind life, then it's not something you're ever really going to understand. I think that's quite important, because sometimes I've kind of thought mind was what I thought it was, and then said, well, it can't do that. And then I said, well, what if it's more than you understand? And I've opened my mind to that. I've discovered, oh yeah, that's true. So I've had clients, trauma victims, post-traumatic stress, people who've lost family, people with terminal illnesses, people with kind of, bankruptcy, the kind of life challenges that sometimes people would say, wow, God, that's a whole different dimension. And the principles, if they're true, force us to say, well, if everybody's experiencing mind, then they have the same potential for experience they've always had. It doesn't matter what happens to you in your life. And being willing to consider that that was true took me out of my own limited idea and allowed me to discover what was for me quite profound. Oh, wow. When people go beyond the feeling of their suffering, they discover something new and or deeper. And that's really what they were missing. And that does everything for them. If they need to deal with things, it gives them clarity and resourcefulness and inspiration and genius. And if they don't have a richness of life, it brings that in. So that's the most fundamental. And the idea is not to say whether you believe that, but your willingness to be open that that's actually true. There's nothing else we're experiencing other than kind of the energy of mind or the nature of mind running through us, if you can put it that way. And thought and consciousness are important facts because they explain, well, how can that one single thing feel so different? So sometimes I hate my life, and sometimes I love being alive, and sometimes I can't wait for the day to be over, and sometimes I wish it would stay forever. What accounts for that difference? And what accounts for the fact that we don't already know that we're just experiencing mind? And that's what thought is allowing us to understand, is that we experience mind in a form, and thought is a way of talking about how it gets painted into that form. And consciousness is a way of talking about our awareness of that reality, both the underlying reality and the one that's painted. And we all know that when I'm sitting here getting distracted by the people I'm staying with, I don't say, oh, I didn't feel like, God, I'm having really impatient thought. That's not helpful. I didn't think that. I thought, God damn it, why can't they keep it down? I told them I was doing this webinar earlier. So the way I experience mind through thought in the form of thought, and the way it's the form of thought that's brought into a reality in my senses and my emotions and my perception, I really felt like I wouldn't have been so distracted and disturbed if they could have just kept it down. And what the principle is pointing to, the fact that it's pointing to, is you're experiencing the creation of experience, that energy turned into a form, or that potential turned into a particular thought, all the time. And that's it. Do you know how sometimes people go around saying, I wonder why I felt that way? Well, the answer is because of thought. and those are the facts, that we're experiencing a formless, rich potential of mind, that's the potential of life, in the medium of thought, through the workings of thought, as a rich, engaging reality through consciousness, which is fantastic. I mean, we get to have an incredibly varied, rich experience of life that has nothing to do with the limitations of our circumstance. So everybody's life and what's driving it is exactly the same. And in my view, the only problem you ever have is that you misunderstand that. So sometimes you get into thinking that your outside circumstances are causing your feelings, and you get misled by that. So, for example, that's caused a lot of problems in my relationship. So when Leela and I first started dating, I thought my time with her was making me happy so much. I got really anxious about holding on to her so much that I got really unattractive, so much that she wanted to dump me. Right? And I thought that because she was going to dump me, I was anxious because I didn't want to lose her. And I was trapped in this cycle that there was nothing I could do about it. Luckily, at that time was just when I was starting to learn about the principles. And I suddenly realized that my anxiety was coming from my thought. And I realized, well, if it's my thought, and I saw for the first time ever that it was me thinking it. So I was fine. And then I would get worried. And then I'd be fine. See, I didn't ever see that before. It was only the principles that drew back a curtain and let me see that was happening. And that's happening to everybody, but people don't see it because they're not looking in the direction of, well, how is my experience coming from me? They just assume it must be coming from where it feels like it's coming from. And then they just talk about that. They just look in that direction. Look what you did to me, which is where I was at. And I had no idea how wacky our logic and our perceptions get when we're anxious. I had no idea. So here I am trying to figure it out. And as soon as I saw it was me, I realized, oh, I don't have to do that. And I just stopped. And then I felt better. And it was so interesting what happened as a result. As a result of that, I stopped ruminating about Leela dropping me. And I completely forgot that she was going to do that. And I was in America and she was in England. I had a great few weeks on my trip. And when I got back to England, she called me up and said, Aaron, do you want to get together? And in hindsight, I realized she was thinking, so I can wrap this puppy up and move on. And she said that is true. And I was just thinking, because I had a fresh mind, I was just thinking, yeah, it'd be great. Let's meet. And because I was so fresh and free, it was a really fun date. And she kind of changed her mind. Right now, where this has caused me trouble is, again, times where I've gotten upset. And because I've been upset, I've been sensitive. And because I've been sensitive, I felt like she's being too harsh. And every time I don't see how that's nothing to do with her, it's just a thought, I get into this loop where I get more and more sensitive, more and more resentful. And then I try to change her. And because I'm so aggressive and resentful and judgmental, she didn't want to listen to me. And it's just a mess until I say, well, look, Aaron, why don't you just allow yourself to feel better, take some accountability for where the thought's coming from. And then my mood lifts and everything goes back into perspective. And I realize, oh, I was making a mountain out of a molehill. So this is absolutely everywhere. So people's happiness depends on it, because there's all the happiness you want if you're willing to see that thought is just the carrier of the potential of happiness, and that you got it on tap. And the cure to dysfunction is there, the cure to unhappiness is there, because once people realize that thought is just a constructed experience of our potential of mind, you realize it can't really hurt you. It doesn't give you a window on reality. It's just another kind of experience you are capable of having, and it doesn't have a life of its own. It's got the life of a thought. And anyone that's tried to remember something will know that the life of a thought is something that works against you. You cannot rely on it. You can't put a thought down and come back to it later. So anyone that knows that, when they have good ideas, they write them down. Because when you're having them, they're so real. It's like, oh, this is going to be great. You want to write it down? No, I got it. I'm so on this. As soon as you're not thinking it, it's like a leprechaun, it disappears. So, I guess the only other thing that I wanted to say was that if you look at issues of personal happiness, they all problems with people's happiness and well-being always have some missing of these facts at their heart. So when people are unhappy and they believe there's something outside of them causing it, or something necessary from the outside to achieve it, it's not that they can't get those things. It's just that until you're willing to have a new thought, or until you're willing to let your mind move on, you can't have a new experience. And if you can't have a new experience, how can you go from unhappiness to happiness? You can't do it. The other problem with people's unhappiness is that they get upset and freaked out when they feel bad. And so one of the misinterpretations and troubles that I've had over the years is I thought that the principles was a better way of feeling better, having a better feeling more of the time. And if you really, and so I would try to think the right way, or get over my thinking, or calm my mind down. And if you trace that back, underneath it is a lack of recognition that all thoughts are feeling, all feelings are thoughts. Sorry, get confused. All feelings are thought. They're all the same substance. And if it's a unharmful substance, The energy of mind is an unharmful substance. It's never going to bruise you. It's never going to cut you. Biologically, it always works for you. A bad thought doesn't work against you. It's a misunderstanding of a bad thought that works against you. So you take it to heart, or you think there's something wrong with you, or you fight against it. And if I'm really, really honest, it wasn't until I saw that fact that all thoughts are the same energy and are harmless and not really a problem until you react to it. And the reaction is a misunderstanding. Because if you look at it, I do really like to be anxious. If I'm watching a movie, tension is a plus. Otherwise, movies can be flat. So it's the feeling's not a problem. It's the seriousness that I think the feeling has. And that's a misunderstanding. If it's all thought, it's all the same substance. And it wasn't until I realized that I get this immense perspective about that we really are fine no matter how we feel. We just don't know it. And it's that don't know it is an understanding of the fact that you are this potential for experience, or this richness of energy or emotion or spirit, and you're having just different experiences through this varying function of thought. The next little misunderstanding that I've kind of seen lately, because things have gotten so simple lately, because as these facts have become facts, there's been less and less to think about. It's like I can think about what I want, but it's always just thought, and we're all just mind. So there's nothing to worry about, and there's nothing to think about. Like I used to try and get more understanding by thinking, but there is no more understanding. It's all mind, and you're experiencing that as thought, and that's your consciousness plus your understanding. What more is there to think about? And at the time, I would, I got to listen to more, I got to study more, I got to understand more. And I can now see that was a complete distraction. That I already had the facts, but I wasn't willing to just sit with it as a fact, to just accept it as a fact. It's almost like I wasn't willing to accept I had what I needed. I had to get more, not in a greedy way. Well, maybe in a greedy way, but maybe, okay, in a greedy way. more like there must be more to it. And it wasn't like I thought there was more to it, like there was a fourth principle or a fifth principle. To me, I knew there were three principles, but more to those three principles. But actually, more recently, I've realized, well, the more is to realize those are the facts. Now, I might not fully experience those facts. Like, I don't think I'm enlightened, but there's nothing more than those facts. And I can't get a deeper appreciation of a fact by thinking about it. That's why my research career was so unsatisfactory. We would add more complications of thought, and it got more sophisticated, but it never got more fundamental. You only get more fundamental with less thought, so you get a deeper, freer sense of mind. There's less complication in it. And that's what's gotten more simple too. It's like when I've accepted, oh, these are just fundamental facts, and it's just you appreciate that or you don't, then there's nothing really to do. There's nothing really to think of. And then you start to see more, as opposed to thinking about it. You start to see more how mind is in action, how life is mind in action. And I don't mean just in me or you. I mean like just generally. It's not just like I had myself separated because of my mind. Oh yeah, it's all through me. But I started realizing how that, how Sid said there's truth everywhere? I started realizing how there's that information, that intelligence, that logic's playing out everywhere, in you and me and everybody, and just having less about it on my mind and just living with it all as facts. And actually, and I always remember Sid used to say that if you learn a fact and you keep looking, you haven't learned the fact, because you haven't accepted that it's a fact, because you're still looking. And if you accepted it as a fact, what would you be looking for? Because you'd realize, oh, I have what I need. And as much as I've used the principles for everything I've ever done for the last 17 years, and it's all been about that, there's a way in which recently I've started to live in it as if it's a fact, which has put to bed my idea of learning. And I remember once I was at dinner with Sid, and he said, "Oh, Aaron, I spoke at a conference that he had, um, and it was a good talk." And he said, "Oh, I liked what you said. It was a good talk." I got really embarrassed, and I said, "Oh, well, essentially, I was like trying to be humble." And I basically said, "Yeah, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can." And you could tell that just didn't resonate with him, the idea that you're trying to learn. And I didn't understand it at the time, because to me, that was the whole point, is knowing you don't really understand and trying to learn. But what I can now see is that within that was a lack of understanding of it as a fact. Because how are you going to learn? It's a fact. It's a fact. If it's there, you're going to learn about it just by being in it. So I got a table in front of me, and that's a kind of fact in the physical world. And there's no point me thinking about it, but if I get up and don't look at it, I'll bang into it, I'll learn something. Oh, that table's there. And that's what I've started to see, is that when I haven't been thinking and trying to learn about the principles, I've just seen it more in action and felt it more within myself and seen it more with others. And everything's got more simple. Like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. And there's so much less effort and trying and thought involved. It's actually been quite shocking that, my work has gotten hundreds of times more effortless, because and so much less seemingly on edge, because it's all taken care of already. It's like, well, look, there are facts. We're just looking to see them, and we're just looking beyond our lack of appreciation for them, and that will do everything for you. And I'm a really good example of that, because everything I've been struggling with, even though it's millions of times better than it was the years and years and we were all on a learning curve, was that I was not accepting it as facts as much as I am now. It's all relative. And so there was more thought involved, and so there was more complication involved, and so there was more effort involved, and it was all more intricate. And now it's a lot more simpler and a lot more obvious, but interestingly, a lot richer, a lot deeper, but yet a lot more normal. So whereas before I might have been looking for depth or trying to get a feel for depth, now I'm like, well, whatever thought I get, I experience. The depth is always there. There's a depth to that. So I really wanted to share that with you. And then when I asked a question, I wanted to share that really everything's in the principles. You don't want to look outside. But actually, for me, seeing that, it's pointing to a very few fundamental facts. And part of understanding it is taking it on as a fact, which means something you can kind of take as a given, and give you a feel for what that's been like for me. And I'm interested in showing how to me, that's what's in play everywhere. So I can see when I start to go off into complication about it all, which to me is a distraction. Like I have lived so much distraction in the name of the principles. It's unreal. And we all do that. We want to learn, we want to understand, we want to do justice to it. And we just thinking about it in a way that completely takes us away from a more open mind that's in touch with the fact, and from treating it like a fact. Why do we have to do anything? No. for it to be true. So any parts of that are left out or that don't make sense, I wanted to have time to answer that more in a question form. So I wanted to kind of spew my guts and then give you guys a chance to ask any questions that you want about anything you want. It could be any of the fields that I work in. It could be about me personally. It could be about you personally, or your uncle's cousin or whatever. So I'd like to have some time for you guys to pick my brains. I'm going to take a quick look at everybody. Oh, Rivka, Vanilla. Oh, full house in Dave's car. Let's see. Okay, no questions. Dickens got his hand up.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah. Who
Can you hear me okay? Great.
Yes, I can. And then we'll have Dickens.
Okay. I wasn't sure my internet connection is just right now. I've had a really close up experience this past couple of weeks with what you've been talking about. That separation of what I think is going on and what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of people on the call are aware, my wife Sheena left me 2 weeks ago.
No.
Just this past Monday night, she took off for Phoenix, Arizona, which is about 2,300 miles away from me. So
Wow.
it's been one hell of a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some extremely dark times, but the thing about my understanding of the principles and how life works, when I was in the deep parts of depression, I could feel that place inside of me that was okay, that place that's unharmed, and it really, quite honestly, saved my life.
Yeah.
'Cause it got me through some times of some really extreme suicidal thoughts and even some partial action in that direction. And that was the first time I felt it. Was a couple nights after she told me she wanted a divorce. I literally had my shotgun out and loaded it up. And at that moment was when I felt that place inside. It literally saved my life. It's such a beautiful thing, this understanding. And I know for a lot of people out there, I talk to people who are having a hard time just really grasping it at all. It's not about understanding it, it's about feeling it. It's about an experience. And it's so beautiful. I mean, here I am 2 weeks later, and I'm still hurting, but I'm okay.
Great.
I really am.
That's good. Great. That's great.
So, thank you for sharing this. It really it helps me out quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, me too, Greg. I mean, you know, there have been times in Leela and I's relationship where she's definitely wanted to get rid of me, and I kind of panic, and then at some point it dawns on me, you know, you're all right. You know, any which way you're right. It's all exactly. Yeah, I like the way you said it. I like the way you said it. It's a great example. I'm sorry it's been a tough couple of weeks as well, you know.
It's just the weather covering up the sky.
Yeah, but you still get rained on, you know, which is sometimes no fun.
No, it definitely hasn't been fun, but I feel some really big changes coming in me.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
I've
cool.
already had a
And
couple of really good insights out of this, and it's
yeah,
really,
yeah,
it sucks right now, but it's going to be okay later. You know, it's just one of those
yeah.
things.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I was pointing to is like, you know, we get to points where it really looks like there's something serious going on and it's never going to be okay, and there's something other than mind, consciousness, and thought going on, and just being willing to consider, what if that's not true, really can take you beyond yourself, you know, and out of some, you know, just, you know, really help you when you need it. At least it has for me.
And I just saw last night. I just saw the seriousness that I'd put into the story of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 17 years I've spent on us or her, and not really much time on me. And I'd created this whole story around it, and it really hit me last night. And I finally became okay with being done. I finally became okay with letting her go last night. And I mean, I woke up this morning and the sun was a little bit brighter, and you know, the sky's a little bit bluer and the trees are a little bit greener, type of thing.
Totally.
It's a pretty amazing thing.
No, it really is. It really is. Yeah. And I've started wondering about that recently as well. It's like, if you really have no limit to your ability to really feel good and to be really have a really rich experience, why would you have things that in your mind you considered limits to that? Like, you know, if I don't, you know, get the train I want, or if I, you know, things don't work out with my, you know, this business project or whatever, you know, or things don't work out in my relationship. I've been seeing, no, really, I do want to kind of have as much freedom of mind and richness, regardless of any of that, my preferences, regardless of all my preferences about how it goes. You know?
And preferences change.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
They change all the time. We may not even notice them changing.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks for speaking up, Greg. Good to see you. You're a little pixely, but I can see it's you.
Good to see you again too.
Yeah. Hey, Dickon, how about you? You had your hand up.
Hi, Aaron.
Hey.
Thanks. It's been really fun listening to you. You're such a good pointer. I like not only where you point, but how you point. So
yeah.
Thank you. Something hit me when you were talking about sort of accepting what's actually fact. And and when you were talking about not really trying to understand, once you realize it's a fact, you just accept and appreciate the fact, and that takes you deeper. I really like that, and I remember when Sid always used to say, "Don't try and understand. Go to a higher level of understanding. Don't try and get to a higher, better feeling." He'd say, "Just be grateful for what you have." And I just heard that deeper than I've heard it before. Be grateful for the facts that you are is really different than be grateful for what you have in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Sort of like the Oprah list.
Totally.
What are all the things you're grateful for? Well, my family, my health, and suddenly hearing it of just be grateful for the fact that we are, for the facts that are true. Really, it just really struck me. I don't.
That's awesome.
I don't know, Aaron.
No.
It's really helpful. So,
yeah,
thank you for that pointing in that direction. Appreciate
no, it was awesome because when you said it just now, I got a deeper appreciation of that too. So that, like, I used to think that too. Like when he said, "Be grateful for what you have," I thought it meant kind of just be grateful for whatever you have, understand. But when you said it, I see what you're pointing to. That's awesome. It's like, be grateful for what you have. Like you have, you have the facts, and you have, that's awesome.
Or be
that's
grateful
so
for what
cool.
Be grateful for what has you.
No, but for what you, but that's true too. No, for what you are, and that, it's funny you should say that. And this is, I love what you said. I heard it when you said it, and this is a bit more personal. But it's like one of the things that always used to interest me is it felt to me that it was easier to see innocence and goodness in others, and harder to see it in myself. And I could see that, well, that's because I take myself more personally and I see it for or whatever. But there was something wrong with that. Like, in principle, there was something wrong with that. And there is a way in which it was not really taking the fact as a neutral fact. It's like having your own spin on it, having your own, not really being grateful for what you have. And like you're saying, for what you are, for what is. And it's amazing the way that points to a deeper potential. Because it's one thing to say, oh, you have access to a deeper potential. It's another to say, oh, that's you. You run with it. You do what you want with that. That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thanks.
I like that.
Thanks,
yeah,
buddy.
thank you.
It's been
a pleasure.
great. Great being with
It's
you.
been great. Yeah, it's really good to be with you too. So glad you clocked on. Do we have any other thoughts or questions? Your time is running out, I'm afraid. So if you do and you don't bring it up, don't regret it. And if you do, you can just get over that. So anyone got their hand up? Any questions? Any thoughts? Any topics you want to have a little peek around? Oh, hey, Bob and Mai.
Hi.
Hiya.
Thank you so much for this webinar. I had an insight while Greg was talking. That's one of the most anguishing things, is to feel that sense of separation from those we love, whether it's, whatever the cause of the loss. And the insight that came to me is, we are that love. We are that, what Sid always says, we are what we seek. Does love really need an object? If we are that love, and if we are all one, there's never any separation from any of us. And so when that person leaves our life, can we still love them? Time and distance doesn't need to stop the love. It doesn't have to be conditional. You can still be that love, feel that love, without objectification of it.
Yeah, that's such a cool point. It's a great example of something that's obvious when you're open to the truth of it, something that's true, but yet something that seems so counterintuitive. It's so funny. I remember when I moved to the States, I had friends and family that would say, oh, we miss you. And I didn't really feel separated from them. So I appreciated what the sentiment that they were saying, but I hadn't really missed them in a good way, because I hadn't felt separated. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely point. A lovely point. There's so many realizations that fall out of looking in the direction of what the principles point to, that are just so true, but yet mind-boggling, but so lovely. It's really nice. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. I hope it's been useful. It's nice to see so many. I haven't been looking at your faces much because I've been worried about my internet here. And sorry for the distractions. Sorry for me getting distracted by the distractions.
Thank you.
But it's been lovely talking to you. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This was
pleasure.
It was wonderful for me. I hope it was for everyone as well. And I really appreciate you taking time out of the lovely location that you're in right now. So hello to everyone that's on that side. And just want to remind everyone that the next webinar is April 13th, and Brooke Wilden Reese from the Cypress Initiative is going to be on. So I hope you can join us either live, or if you're on the recording, that's great too. And we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.